Hi everyone, my name is Paige Verica and I will be presenting my research on the effects of birth order on the Big Five. The Big Five are these 5 personality traits that psychologists have deemed the most important through a process called factor analysis. Each of these traits has several facets or additional personality traits that fall under the umbrella trait of the Big Five. The first trait is openness to experience, which is one of the harder traits to define, but it is the willingness to try new things. Some facets of openness include creativity, curiosity, and traditionalism. The next trait is conscientiousness, which is how hardworking and responsible someone is. A highly conscientious person would also be described as self-disciplined, punctual, and well-organized. The third trait is extroversion, which is the degree to which someone is outgoing and sociable. So an extroverted person is very outgoing, while an introverted person keeps more to themselves. Next, we have agreeableness, which is defined as the tendency to or not to cooperate with others. Someone who scores high on the trait of agreeableness would be considered trustworthy, compassionate, and forgiving. And finally, we have neuroticism, which is the degree to which a person uses effective means for dealing with their problems. So someone who is highly neurotic might also be considered insecure and anxious, while someone who scores low on the trait of neuroticism would be described as emotionally stable. The discussion of the effects of birth order on one's personality began in 1930s with Alfred Adler, whose ideas are highlighted by the Campbell et al. Study. Adler theorized that the situations that accompany a person's birth order influence their personality, not the actual birth order itself. Adler theorized that firstborns enjoy being the center of attention since they were only children for some time, but then they experience this feeling of being dethroned when their younger sibling arrives. Middle children often view life as a race where they are constantly trying to catch up with both their older and younger siblings in the eyes of their parents. Lastborns also view life as a race, but are often discouraged because they feel that they are too far behind. Another study I want to highlight is the Eckstein et al. Study, which was a meta-analysis of 200 birth order studies with significant results. Firstborns were found to be the highest achievers, most responsible, most self-disciplined, but also most vulnerable to stress and having the least emotionality. Lastborns were rated as the most artistic, most rebellious, most popular, most likely to choose activities that involve social interplay. And they were also rated the highest in agreeableness and most empathetic. While conducting my literature review, I found several studies that shared a similar design, including Jefferson et al. And Sutton and McIntyre. In these studies, participants completed a personality inventory, and the results were analyzed based on birth order. Findings from these studies led me to draw the following hypotheses. My study had 5 different hypotheses that predicted which birth order position would score highest on each trait in the Big Five. So I predicted that firstborns would be the most conscientious and neurotic, while lastborns would be the most open to experience, most extroverted, and most agreeable. I had a total of 81 participants for this study with a mean age of 19.9. The majority of participants were firstborns, or the oldest sibling in their family, followed by lastborns, or the youngest sibling in their family, and my smallest group of participants was middle children, meaning they had at least one older and at least one younger sibling. Only children and multiples, so twins and triplets, were excluded from this study, and participants were also instructed to only include biological siblings. So half, step, and adopted siblings were not considered when determining birth order position. A few ethical considerations. All ethics of the study were approved by the Institutional Review Board, and all participants were treated according to the American Psychological Association Code of Ethics. Participation in the study was voluntary, and participants received no form of compensation. The survey was either emailed out to participants or posted on one of their class Brightspace pages, and the survey was completed via Google Forms. Participants were first asked to provide their age, gender, and birth order position. After providing this demographic information, they completed the Big Five inventory too. There were a total of 60 items, 12 items for each trait in the Big Five. An example item is, I am someone who is outgoing, sociable. For each item, the participant rated how well they agreed or disagreed with the statement. Items were measured on a Likert scale, with 1 being strongly disagree and 5 being strongly agree. Once all of the survey data was coded, I conducted 5 one-way ANOVAs, each trait in the Big Five by birth order position. Firstborns were found to be the most extroverted, which did not support my original hypothesis. A post hoc analysis revealed that the difference of mean scores between firstborn and middle children, and the difference of mean scores between firstborns and lastborns was significant, but the difference between middle children and lastborns on the trait of extroversion was not. The study produced no other statistically significant results. And one possible explanation for this is that I was unable to control all possible confounding variables, such as race, age gap between siblings, and gender of each sibling within the family. One study that I used in my lit review, Beck et al., was able to exclude siblings that had an age gap exceeding 9 years and found significant results. Another possible explanation is my sample. In comparison to previous research that I used in my lit review, my sample size was much smaller. For example, Jefferson et al. Had a sample size of 14,407. The sample in my study was also exclusively female, unlike all of the other studies in my literature review that were mixed gender, except for one. The average age of my sample was also much younger than the average age of studies in my literature review. The Jefferson et al. Study, for example, had an average age of 56.2. There are a few avenues for future research on this topic. The first is the effects of birth order on different facets of the Big Five. For example, there may be significant differences between birth order on creativity and curiosity, but not intellect, all of which are facets of openness to experience. Another direction future research can go in includes looking at different types of sibling relationships. So do any patterns exist between gender and birth order? For example, do firstborn males consistently score higher on some personality traits than firstborn females? This also includes looking at how adopted, step, and half siblings, as well as multiple births, impact birth order and personality. For example, take an adopted sibling who's the second oldest chronologically, but was the 4th child added to the family. Should they be considered a middle child or a lastborn? And how do each of these possible birth order positions affect their personality? One last avenue of future research is to examine different demographics, particularly race. None of the studies in my literature review, as well as my own study, did not take race into account. So this is definitely an area where we need a lot of research. Here are my references, and thank you for watching.